Great.
So here we are in fine form on a Friday morning, and I'm joined, and it'll put me in even better form with Pat+Jude. How are you? You are looking extremely well this morning, Pat. If you don't mind my saying
Thank you
so.
very much, Dr. Collins. I'm not in my normal dark self because I'm not saying where I am, but I'm not in my normal dark room. So
Yeah, well, it's
I'm
maybe it's
I'm
the way the light
I'm
falls in your face. It's making it look even better.
yeah, exactly.
Anyway, how are we?
Right.
Ready for the fray?
I'm grand. I'm very good, actually.
Good. Let's talk about something that knocked everybody off their chair, including me, and that is Pat Cullen. Pat Cullen, as
Yeah.
you know, was the general secretary and chairperson and top dog, so to speak, if that's not insulting, of the Royal
Mm.
College of Nursing, and was a formidable force when she came on to speak for them and about their wages and so on. And just about everybody was very proud of her as being from this part of the world. Incidentally, just in passing, she's from Carrickmore, which
Yes.
is the same small town, same place as Barry McElduff, same small town.
Uh,
Isn't
uh,
that something?
I thought you were going to say you, but
Well,
anyway,
I was brought up 10 miles from it. That not do?
yeah,
Okay,
that's
Pat
a world
Cullen,
away.
what do you think of that as a move by Sinn Féin or a move by her?
Dude, it's a masterstroke as far as I'm concerned. Pat Cullen, I saw her on Question Time, BBC Question Time one night, and she was formidable and impressive and very reasoned and very articulate. She was the type of person, you'd take home to meet your mother and father type thing, that sort of respectability that she had. And I thought, and by the way, Jesus, you talk about a bolt from the blue. Here's a woman who's a serious player in England. She had to resign forthwith almost from her position. So she's taken a big risk. Michelle Gildernew, what was she only won at one stage by 57 votes, in Fermanagh, South Tyrone. So like Pat Cullen's coming. The only thing I presume a lot of people who maybe were on the fringes might now say, look, she's perfectly acceptable. But the other thing, Jude, it's a great coup for Sinn Féin. I think it sort of suggests now they're becoming more acceptable to the mainstream. They've got, Pat Cullen wouldn't have joined, I don't think, a gang, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, but she certainly feels comfortable enough. Now, I'm putting words in her mouth, obviously, by making that suggestion, but I presume that's the
Well,
case.
I think you must be right, Pat, because I was thinking the same thing. Uh, uh, in some ways, you would say, picture Pat Cullen, a top woman in the UK on nursing, and you say she's going on into politics. You'd almost certainly say, oh, she must be going to join maybe the
The
SDLP,
Labour Party,
or
the right
perhaps
wing
she's
Labour
joined the
Party.
Labour Party, or maybe the Alliance Party. The
Yeah,
last,
something like that.
maybe not
Exactly.
the last, but one of the last you think of as Sinn Féin. But then again, you
Yeah.
see she's from Carrickmore, and Carrickmore is a
Mm.
town that has a very strong Republican reputation. I was going to say
Yeah.
condition there. There's
Yeah, you
something.
got it. It probably has. It's
But
probably got a Republican
they
condition
had
as
that.
well.
So
Yeah.
it's, and I gather that I missed this now, but I gather she was at a West Belfast Talks Back thing about a year
Yeah.
ago. And she was one of the panel, I think. And the subject of the NHS came up, and she said that the only future for the NHS in Ireland would be as a united body, North and South.
Yeah, I remember reading that, and
Uh,
some of the unionists went ape about that at the time.
uh, well, I see. I don't even remember
Doctor
that.
Collins, I stood up. I think you might actually have written a blog about that at the time. Not
I
100%
don't.
certain, but I'm pretty certain you did.
Well, that has slipped between the
So it must
cracks
have
of my
escaped
head
your memory
because
since.
I can't
Yeah,
remember it at all. But if I
yeah.
said
No,
it,
I'm
was
not. I'm not
obviously
saying you
true.
did, but I'm pretty
Well, it was
certain
very,
because I
very
remember reading it
far-sighted
somewhere,
of
and I
me.
think it was you.
Very
Yeah,
far-sighted of me in that case. I tell you
yeah,
something that, well, two things, Pat. Do you think she's going to win from
yeah.
Honest True?
Well, put it, I guess I think she'll certainly get a lot of the SDLP type voters. She will certainly get the Sinn Féin voters, and she might get a couple of moderates maybe in the unionist community because I don't know well, I don't know I was watching the Sunday politics program last Sunday morning, and one of the packed seats they're talking about in the unionist pact is Fermanagh. But Jim Allister said he would not agree to anybody from the DUP. They wanted somebody from civic society that all unionists could vote for. So, Jude, I don't know where they're going to find that person. So I think Pat Cullen would have a good chance of winning. I genuinely do.
Well, I would have expected that Sinn Féin would win that seat anyway, because they know how
Yeah,
tight it is and they know how to get their vote out, and there'd be no, you know, going easy or not being sufficiently organised. I'd say they'd be wound up to 90 to get that seat in the
yeah.
first place. And now with Pat Cullen, I would say they have the wind in their sails, and they will be. I'd be very surprised if they don't win it. But I think it's interesting for some people have made this point. Isn't it a waste having Pat Cullen as the MP for Manor South Tyrone when Sinn Féin don't take their seats in Westminster? How would you answer that?
Yeah.
I have my own answers, but you can tell me what you think.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know, but you're asking, but in a way, I sort of agree with that, Jude. Because here's the point, Jude, and I know what you're going to say. With Northern Ireland, there's what 18 seats out of 650, so
Mm.
you have 632 that are not in the least but interested. So you've got a fair point, and so on. That's I presume the main answer. But the other answer is sometimes you can form opinion. What is it? uh, a victory and a loss in the sense that you shape future opinion by, if somebody gets up in the middle of a debate in the House of Commons and absolutely excoriates a Tory minister like over things like Gaza, the Tories might still win the vote, but by God, somewhere down the line, there's some wee guy or wee girl listening and saying, "I agree with that person." So it's shaping future. So there are gains and losses.
Uh, would you like to see Sinn Féin taking their seats?
Yeah, I would now, Jude, because I don't think it's the same thing anymore. We're now on our road to United Ireland. So anything that sort of can steer that now, back in the day, Jude, I would have said no, but I've changed my mind. And a reason I've changed my mind is I think we have now crossed sort of over the threshold. It should be now part of the strategy. We're taking our seats to get to United Ireland.
That would involve swearing allegiance to King Charles. You okay with that?
Jude, I remember what he called him, De Valera said. He said the words out loud, but and he said he was not a chance. Like I've seen things in people doing politics, like what in America, Nikki Haley. No, she was running against Donald Trump. She said he was insane, a Looney Tune, and whatever. And now she's looking for a seat and says he's one of the great leaders of our time. So that's politics.
Yeah. I remember it may have been the 80s or so, perhaps you'd remember it in Derry, that the local councillors had to renounce violence before they were
Yeah,
accepted. And I remember reading one Republican and him saying, "Don't be ridiculous. Of course, renounce violence, even though you don't actively believe it should be renounced. Oh, renounce violence, of course, because are you going to allow them to set something up to block you from doing something that will advance your cause?" Which is
exactly.
very pragmatic, and there's a lot to be said for it. Although some people would say,
But you
"Oh,
see, the difference now is if Sinn Féin go back, just say after July 4th, say on July 5th,
yeah,
Sinn Féin have maybe 9 or 10 seats as opposed to what is it, 7 at the minute? They're then the biggest party. They can then say we are the majority. We represent the people. Not going over in the past as a minority. Like the hind teeth type thing. They're going over this time as the horse, the main part.
yeah,
The
yeah, yeah."
big beast. And so that's a different scenario.
Aye, it is indeed. Sinn Féin have stood down from, they're not running in 4 seats.
Yeah.
So what, is that a wise move, do you think, or what are they trying to achieve there?
I presume that's not to split the nationalist vote. By the way, I'm going to touch that one. I presume the West Belfast. Well, no, it's not really West. So as
South Belfast. South
South
Belfast.
Belfast. Uh,
I wrote the 4 of them down. I'm trying to remember what they were now.
uh,
Strangford, maybe? Wait a minute.
uh,
See if I can find it. No, can't find
well, there's certainly not running in Derry.
No. In any case, it's an interesting move, because it seems to
Yeah,
me that Sinn Féin are intent this time. Certainly, they'd like to increase their vote, and they will, because they did so bloody badly last time out. Remember,
yeah,
2019
yeah,
was it?
yeah,
But they're very aware of the fact that they want to get a nationalist / Republican majority in the
yeah,
north. They really want to
yeah,
nail that down. And that's one way of doing it, it seems to me. Now,
Yeah.
SDLP says they're running people in all constituencies. But
Yeah.
I heard Colum Eastwood being asked about, or the term we used to him was a paper candidate. That is to
Yeah.
say, their name will be on the ballot, but the people in the SDLP will know that, essentially stand back and give your vote to, or don't vote at all.
Yeah. That was Hume's one always, that we stand on every election, that to do not to do so would be even though on the past that did split the Nationalist votes in certain key places. Remember, was it West Belfast? He split the vote one time in Union Skinner.
Yeah. Would you approve of that, Pat? Is that a good strategy, do you think?
It is, Jude. As I was saying earlier, Jude, from a nationalist perspective, the unions still obviously won't like it. But the point is, Jude, we are now at a nexus period. We definitely are. Things are definitely changing. What Sinn Féin is the biggest party in Derry, biggest party in Belfast, the biggest party in the Assembly. The population demographics have changed quite significantly. Brexit has changed the whole dynamic of the debate in regard to United Ireland, where there's all sorts of debates about the finance and all that. But Jude, 10 years ago, we weren't even anywhere near here. We are now.
Yeah.
United Ireland. Jude, I remember years ago, people, even after the Good Friday Agreement, there was almost a sort of a dampening down. Right, we're here now. We've got our rights. So on. Look, we can live within the system, and we can have our Irish names on our streets, and the housing executive is giving houses to Catholics, and we can get jobs and all this. And then along comes Brexit, and everything changed.
Yeah. It's a good time to be a nationalist or a Republican, must say. Now, I come back to this. Is it a waste in any sense to send Pat Cullen to Westminster, where she won't be in the debating chamber? Is it a waste of a real talent? And I'm wondering if it's comparable with, like, for example, if she goes there, if she wins that seat, and I think she will, that means she stops all her nursing work, all her representation of the RCN. It does? Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
As far as I know, Jude, if I read the thing right, she resigned immediately earlier this week. Prior.
The reason I
What are
asked,
you going to say?
The reason I asked, Pat, is I don't know, but John Finucane headed up a quite healthy legal firm. I find it hard to believe that he has now stopped practicing law, although he is the MP for North Belfast. So I was just wondering well, maybe I'm wrong in that, and if I am, I withdraw it. But I sort of assumed that he wasn't going to give up his whole legal practice that he built up from the ground up, actually.
But Jude, being an MP these days, I would presume, is quite onerous and quite demanding. Can you give full time to being an MP and being a solicitor? I doubt it very, very much these days, particularly in Northern Ireland.
It'd be interesting to know now. The assumption is, I think, that she has left the RCN.
Jude, if you're in England and you remember the Tory party and there's 650, there's not a lot expected. But in Northern Ireland, you have to be on top of nearly every brief because you're on nearly every program under the sun. You're interviewed for this, and if you make a faux pas, it can resound very badly because people like Nolan and Talkback, it's like a dog with a bone, particularly if Nationals mess up.
Yeah. I had one other thought, and that was this. When she did it, it was such a surprise. Here was an eminently, dare I say it, respectable woman, a woman who was, respected on every side. And all the time, here she was, actually a Republican. I mean, I don't believe that she wasn't a Republican and then became one last week or whatever. I'm certain she had Republican views on things. So I find that very reassuring because there are a lot of people, I think, who would be sort of Republican inclined, Shinner inclined, but they would say, and they're a bit rough and, they're not really I wouldn't feel comfortable with them. And in fact, then you have Pat Cullen, the essence of respectability. And she says, actually, I'm a Republican and I'm very proud of it.
Yeah.
I think
Did
that
you
kind
see
of
the thing
gives a
about
real encouragement.
Yeah, and I agree totally. But I think there was this thing in the past, Jude, where there was a certain element in republicanism that didn't do Republican movement any favors. But but there was always that element of respectability about them as well. And there you could find the doctor who was a Republican, and the guy in the back street who was a Republican. Uh, uh, you know, um, it was basically whether you believed that Britain had used force in Ireland, and physical force at the time was a
Uh,
legitimate response. By the way, I personally didn't believe it, but there were many people who did, and I
mm,
respect them because some of the people that I knew were absolutely, totally honourable, decent people who said,
uh,
"No, wait a minute, we can't fight this." That they have used internment, thuggery, raids, and all the rest of it. As Martin McGuinness once famously said, Pat, I didn't go looking for the war. The war came to me. You can
uh,
believe what you
but
want.
I'd say again though that by and large, like, there are exceptions, and I can think of one in particular. I'm sure you can think of it too, where a middle class person was very much involved in Republican
Yeah,
resistance. But the vast majority of Republicans are working class. And there is a
absolutely.
class thing that keeps people away from, I think, Sinn Féin. I think that is rapidly breaking down, in part
Yeah,
thanks to the people in the South, young guys who are clearly young professionals and terribly competent and fully committed to Sinn Féin.
what's
I
good
spoke to a young
brings.
guy at work. I spoke to a
Go ahead.
nephew of Maureen's, my wife, and asked him. He works for. He did work for the central bank, and I said to him, you know, well, if there was an election tomorrow in the South, who would you vote? Sinn Féin. He said, of course. I
Yeah,
says, really? He
yeah,
says, yeah. I said, what? Well, will you be the exception in your? Not at all. He says, everybody in the group that I know would definitely vote for Sinn Féin. Now that was about 2 or 3 years ago. So perhaps there is that there, but there must be others who are just sort of a wee bit reluctant to commit themselves. And I think somebody like Pat Cullen coming out is a really, really
yeah.
good thing.
But
Okay.
that's a lovely secretary to the next one. Stephen Collins doesn't believe that, does he? The Irish Times columnist. What's your opinion of the article is in this morning?
Yeah, that's the one where he's talking about Davy stockbrokers.
His stockbrokers, yeah, yeah,
That Pierce Doherty went over to them, and to Stevens's disgust, Davy's stockbrokers say that they're fine. That sounds good. We'll be happy to see Sinn Féin in government. And he essentially is saying, look at that. They've thrown away every principle they had. And he's saying, you know, the Davy stockbrokers are at the same time riding for a fall because Sinn Féin will really sort of rook them eventually.
yeah,
He's trying to ride two horses at the same time. But you see, first, Stephen, he reaches for anything he can get to hit them. I think, here's what I think. The reason they went over there, the reason Pierce Doherty went there was the same reason Mary Lou was in Boston. It's to placate the markets in advance,
yeah,
to reassure them that, you know, to take away one more possible obstacle to them getting to the top. And the fact of the matter is that Stephen doesn't like it. And I would think a lot of the Southern government parties don't like it either.
yeah. Stephen took right. Pierce Doherty goes over to London to meet all these financiers. With the backing or the background people being Davy stockbrokers. And Davies are the old respectable, and by the way, I think they're owned by Bank of Ireland these days. I
That's
think
right.
I
That's
think
right.
they're yeah. Right. So they go over and it's basically as you say an attempt. Don't frighten the horses. That in the event of Sinn Féin getting into government, we're not going to upset the apple cart of the financial model we currently have. And apparently, it was very, very successful. Very successful. And Stephen Collins, it's just the most ridiculous. He doesn't do it. He's taking offense at that. And he says there's a government figure, whoever that is, that he said that they looked askance and they don't know whose reputation suffered more, Sinn Féin's or Davies stockbrokers, because they accompanied Sinn Féin over to London. Dude, I think most people, me, you, and half the country, are saying fair play to Davies stockbrokers, fair play to Pierce Doherty, He's gone over, sorting it out. Absolutely brilliant at politics. And he says, by the way, the basis of Stephen's article is during the financial crisis, Sinn Féin lambasted the government parties for bailing out the banks. Dude, there was plenty of people who were not left wingers, who were not
Yeah,
Sinn
yeah,
Féin supporters, who lambasted the government for doing this very same thing. A hell of a lot of them, and there's some people to this day who said, when you look down south, a lot of schools didn't get built, a lot of hospitals didn't get built, a lot of things that we are suffering from today in our country, Jude.
Well,
Uh,
I'm
you know, so like I consider that one of the most spurious things going.
Well, it's a handy weapon for Stephen, and I guess he hopes that other people see it the same way as him. I kind of find it laughable, really. But he also had another. Was it his article that talked about the shady figures in Belfast? Uh,
Yeah, I don't know how many
again,
times this has been trotted out that it won't be Sinn Féin's financial policy will not be decided by the party, but by shady figures, a lot of them from Belfast. Remember, Tommy Gorman always thought, former Northern Ireland editor, Tommy was no Sinn Féin supporter, and that's on the record. And I remember one night Tommy got pissed off and he said, "Look, these so-called shady figures are advisors to Sinn Féin. They're out in the open. If you want, anybody wants to check." He said other parties have got exactly the same people in the background. So this sort of thing, just because somebody in Sinn Féin was a former Republican prisoner doesn't make them shady. They're paid advisors, the same as the Mary Lou's paid advisors are in Dublin. It's almost, if you're from Belfast and Sinn Féin, oh Jesus, you're not entitled to opinion about the finances down south.
but they'd be a very foolish group of political grouping that wouldn't use whatever talent there might be in Belfast.
Exactly.
I mean, ex-prisoners, ex-IRA, ex-whatever. I think they're very sensible. And I mean, the proof
Dude,
of the
isn't
pudding
the
is in
proof
it.
in isn't the proof in the pudding? These guys are seriously smart.
Yeah.
By the way, if it's the guys from West Belfast, fair play to them because they show they are really clever. They got Pierce over to London to explain what was happening, and by all accounts, it went very well. So
Yeah.
why are we worrying? Even if they are shadowy figures, which is a load of bollocks, but even if they were, they're very, very clever, shadowy people.
I know. Poor Stephen wants to have it both ways, you know. He wants to say that the shadowy figures are really putting the brakes on the Sinn Féin. At the same time, he's saying, "Oh God, Sinn Féin are running amok. They've now convinced Davy stockbrokers that they're good, nice guys."
Yeah.
There was also another article in the Irish Times today by what the other half of the gruesome twosome. One half being Stephen
Newton
Collins and
Emerson.
the other being Newton Emerson. Newton Emerson is playing this old tune again that the cost of a united Ireland is not clear to a lot of people. And he brings up the thing about pensions, and he brings up the thing about the cost of unification, the whole subvention thing.
Mhm.
Now, the pension thing, I really think that is ridiculous, where they say,
Yeah.
"Oh, if I'm a British citizen now, and I'm getting my pension from Britain, from London, and I'm now in a United Ireland, well, where's my pension?" Again, I don't know what your experience is, Pat, but mine is I work in Canada and I'm getting a Canadian pension. They don't give a damn where I
Yeah.
live. They
Yeah.
say, "You've worked these number of years. Here's this small pittance for you." And I'm very grateful to get it. Is
Yeah.
this a common thing, or have you experienced anything
Jim,
else?
I'm worked all my adult life for northern companies. My pension is from Britain because that's where I paid my tax. That's
Yeah.
where I paid my national insurance. That's what
Mm,
I'm entitled to because
mhm,
I paid national insurance for what was it, 40 years.
mm.
The Irish government aren't going to give me a pension because I didn't pay any national insurance to them.
And this is
They,
despite the fact,
you get your pension from where you worked.
yeah, and you're living actually in the southern state. Yeah, well,
Republican.
I mean,
Yeah.
the thing is so ludicrous, and yet he keeps on
By the way,
trucking.
Jude, I don't know about you. I lost the worldly love reading that article. I just thought to myself, like, what a load of bollocks.
I thought it was surprising. Well, not surprisingly, but it was very convoluted, and there was all
Yeah.
sorts of ingredients
You
tossed
know,
into.
Jude, it's like that's. I think that should be. I don't know if it's got a place. Maybe it has got a place in a public newspaper or a newspaper, but it always struck me that that should be sort of the nitty gritty behind the scenes for the bean counters to work out,
Yeah.
and then. Remember the famous one about Richard Nixon? Somebody came to him about monetary policy. He says, "Give it to me," and 5 bullet points type thing. He want, and that's
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
I read the article and I was going, "Oh, yeah, you really give a shit." Or I shouldn't say it, but really, halfway through the article, I was going, right. It was so convoluted. I thought,
Mm.
oh
Mm.
no, I actually stopped reading it.
Yeah. The thing is, of course, that Newton Emerson is not an economist by any means,
No,
and neither am I, or neither are you. But
yeah,
if he's going
yeah,
to try communicating with people of reasonable intelligence, we'll give ourselves that credit. We should be able to read the bloody thing. Okay,
yeah.
let's move on. This is sort of a little small note, really, but it's an interesting one. You and I have discussed often this question of what changes would be acceptable in the United
Yeah.
Ireland. What would be on the table and so on. Now, two of the things I think you balked a bit at, and which I don't balk at all, were a change of the flag and a change of the anthem. And I see in the paper today that Gerry Adams is saying, or has said, that if people want another national anthem, then it's on the table. People can't say we're planning for the future and then say we can't talk about it. That is not the way in which we were able to put the process together. So he's saying things like the flag and the anthem should be subject for debate. Is that a bridge too far, Pat?
Well, something. I know a couple of very moderate nationalists in the Republic,
Hmm.
and I was absolutely surprised. And they says, "No, no, that's our national anthem. That's our flag, and we're not changing it." No, I was surprised. Dude, I would consider myself considerably more left wing than them. The two people I had a recent conversation with. And by the way, these are your almost daily Irish mascoer types, whatever. Anyway,
Hmm.
so bottom line for me is, Jude, I think, yeah, I have no problem. Jude, I've said to you before, I often thought Danny Boy or the Londonderry Air or whatever should be our national anthem. I know you don't agree with that, but I'll
I
tell you
don't
why
mind.
I
I don't
always thought
mind.
that.
I'm easy. I'm easy.
Yeah, yeah. But Danny Boy it's an old traditional Irish air. It was notated by a woman called Jane Ross, who
Uh-huh.
heard a guy called Blind Willie McCurry playing it. She ran down in Limavady and she said, "Keep playing it until she noted it." And then it went to America and it was played in all these old Irish places. And a guy called Fred Waverley, an Englishman, heard it and fell in love with the tune, and he wrote the song Danny Boy. So what was originally an old traditional tune became known as Londonderry Air, became known as Danny Boy. It covers every aspect of all the traditions and cultures on this island.
It's a nice song. It's a little bit wistful, though. I tend to like
Absolutely.
my anthems to be stirring. I think one of the best
Yeah.
anthems, national anthems, is the German national anthem. You know,
Yeah.
Deutschland, Deutschland, über. It's got a certain.
Always think of marching stormtroopers when I hear that. By the way,
Okay,
the
yes,
old
that's true.
French
But I
one,
mean, that's
Le
really it
Marche,
is.
Le Marche.
It's a
Huh?
call. Yeah, Marseille also. It's got like a call
Yeah.
to arm. That's what you want people to. That's why they play it. Supposedly, why they play it before sporting events. I've always thought that Iron Event was a wee bit. I don't know.
Uh,
I wouldn't be mad. Let's say I'm happy enough to
uh,
have,
uh,
but I'm not.
wasn't
I
I
would be
think it
happy
was
to have a
Trump,
go
wasn't it?
to.
Wasn't it Trump had a go at, I think it was the Spanish for not singing the words to their national anthem. And apparently there's no words to their national anthem.
I was going to say. I was going
I
to
can't
say
remember. Well,
he
I don't
hadn't
know
seen
whose
the Irish
national anthem, by
football
the way,
team.
has no words, but Trump had a go at them. And I thought it was brilliant.
I
Yeah,
thought he was going to say that the Irish football team tended not. Actually, that's something that irritates me a lot. It really
but
irritates me. I think if you're representing Ireland and if the national anthem is played, you should be able to sing it. You really should be able to sing it. I think it's
yeah.
awful to see people either with their mouth shut or chewing gum or, you've hardly.
One of the things that Mickey Hart did when he was manager of Tyrone before he became manager of Derry, years back, he said when his players were going to the national anthem, one thing they were all going to learn was the national anthem, Asgailga. And
uh,
apparently they all sang. Now I don't know whether Asgailga or Asberta, but anyway, they sang it. They sang the national. And if you notice any RTE coverage of the Tyrone, I think Kerry final, and they know the camera pans down the line of players, every one of the Tyrone players was singing the song.
Wow. Wow. That's interesting.
Mm.
That's interesting. Well, that's us done with our. Have we got more time or not?
We've got
That's
five.
us done with
Jude,
our main
here's
menu.
one after you run.
Yeah.
After you run this one by you.
Yeah.
Trump yesterday was found guilty on
Oh.
all 34 counts, and yet he's still on the ticket as the Republican Party's candidate. And they're like, what does that tell you about America? What does it tell you about politics in America? What does it tell you about the judicial system? And what does it tell you about the voters?
Well, I heard somebody on the radio this morning. I think it was an RT radio actually, and they were saying that the guy was saying, "Well, face it, you have the sort of liberal elite in both coasts, West Coast, the East Coast. These are the Rust Belt people, and they're the sort of liberal Democrats certainly speak of them with contempt that Hillary Clinton has got for that, calling them the deplorables." Even Obama was a bit iffy about them. That there's a certain tendency to look down on them, and they're just about fed up with that. In a way, I've got a sneaking sympathy with that. If you think of movies, for the movies I was brought up with, I assumed that's how America was. Big double staircases coming, everybody dressed up to the nines, everybody with loads of money. And then you discover that there's some terribly poor people in America. So I think it's these people saying, for God's sake, you're not going to tell us what to do and take us around and take away our industry and make us ashamed of anything we do. They're saying, no, we're gonna put somebody in place. Would you share that sentiment to any extent, Pat?
Yeah, I do actually, but the only thing is, when you consider the person who represents him, a billionaire who's got a golden toilet, that's
That's
the
a
irony
set of
there. But
snags.
no, but no other thing. There's a guy, I was watching Sky News this morning. There's a guy on. He said, "Oh, I'll be voting Trump, irrespective of the result of the court case." And the reporter says, "All 34 charges found guilty by an ordinary judge and jury." Yeah, hey, man, I have no problem type saying that. He says, like he's not a type of guy. He says about invited round for a drink or go to the pub with or anything. But basically, what he was saying, Trump represents something that he wants represented. Jude, Trump has peeled it back to the 1940s, mom, apple pie, and the white picket fence.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying America is going to the dogs in a handcart because of the rise of these black people and these Latinos and all these other people and these people coming over the border and all the rest. And he's talking about immigrants, which I always laugh at. His parents his father was what I think might have been born in Germany, but his grandfather certainly was, and so on. A land built by immigrants. Now he's complaining about immigrants. But anyway, that's a side issue. No, the thing about it, he's a narcissist. He's a fantasist. He's a con artist. He's a liar. He's a cheat. And yet, hey, Jude, and that doesn't, muck doesn't seem to stick on him at all.
Well, if you stop to think about it, most politicians, that's not a bad description of them. If you think of the American presidents, an awful lot of them could be charged. I mean, Nixon, for example, tricky dicky. We know that John F. Kennedy led a life in public that was a very different one from the one he led behind closed doors. So that deception of the general public isn't something new. I'll tell you the one thing I like about Trump. He doesn't believe in America being the policeman of the world. He's against foreign war. Now, I'm completely behind that. I don't understand.
I
Why
am too.
is it that Americans feel they need to go halfway around the world and allow their sons and daughters, especially their sons, to be killed or to kill? I just seem to be crazy.
Yeah, but here's the other side of the story. Jude, he would give twice as much to the Israelis as Biden. He wouldn't even stop to think about it. He moved the embassy from the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. 60 Palestinians, not one of them armed, were killed by the IDF that day. About 1,200 and all were injured. One of the people they shot dead was a guy actually in a wheelchair. Now, how much of a threat was he? You got to ask yourself, and so on. And as well as that, remember the American Palestinian or Egyptian journalist that the Saudis chopped up in the embassy. A lot of American politicians were saying this guy's an American. We should be some sanction Trump ruled it out within about 10 minutes. In other words,
Yeah.
our my business interests come first.
I mean, I only mentioned that as be one of the few things that I would be in favor
Yeah, yeah,
of his
yeah,
policies. But he's an
yeah.
odious man, a highly odious
Yeah.
man. What was I going to say? Oh, finally, have you seen the series called Monk on Netflix?
No, but apparently it's very good. Somebody else told
See
me about it.
it, see it. I
Yeah,
discovered it last week and I'm gobbling it up. It's very
yeah,
good. Soothes your nerves. It'll not give you an insight into
yeah.
the human condition, but it will soothe your nerves, especially if you've a big fat wine glass in your hand filled to the brim.
That will certainly be the case. Good luck to
Okay,
you.
Pat. All the best.